All right, Mr. Gregory Ally. How you doing today?
Hey James, how you doing?
Great, man. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to learn about your business and the Valor Solutions and everything that you've accomplished. I'm excited to get to know you better and your business and your business model and what it's brought for you and the in your community. So if you're ready for it, let's get into some questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
So let's briefly introduce yourself and tell me about your role as CEO and the founder of the Valor Solution.
Yeah. Um, so obviously, founded Valor about 7 years ago. A little about myself. Started in clinic management, healthcare management. Went back, that's what I got my undergrad in, and I went back to get my master's, and get my MBA, so I could sort of start having all the tools that I needed to be able to start a business. And after I was working in the clinic space, I worked at an independent physician association or like a network of doctors. And they offered services to clinics. And they asked me to start up a service line that was focused on insurance consulting as well as with providing consulting services and professional services to clinics, which I'd been doing for a clinic in the past. So I started doing medical billing for clinics, and it became pretty clear to me. I was like, I can totally do this myself, and uh, have my own company doing this. And got an opportunity, got approached by a large clinic to run their billing and manage their money. And so opportunity, meets preparedness. Just kind of jumped into it, and that's where I started. We started in the medical billing space for a large pediatric group out in Arizona, and over time, we started building automations in this space that were really cool, really fun, and I realized that I really want to spend my time focusing on the technology piece and less on the medical billing side of the house. And so I sold the medical billing business and then just took all of that and put it all into the technology side of the house. And that's really where kind of how we came to being at Valor. So 7 years of running a company, three almost 4 years of running the technology side of the house, which is the Valor solution that we're kind of talking about here today. Um, and honestly, I've always wanted to start my own business. So I wouldn't say there's anything that really inspired me other than it was something that I was working towards. And then again, I just had the opportunity for somebody to said, "Hey, will you help me with this? Will you manage this?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm super excited." And
100%.
that's what kind of got us going.
Yeah. So
Um,
you just kind of saw that like opportunity, and you turned it into like, hey, I see this. I can see a way to make it better, and make it my own. I'm gonna do this. So with that being said, like, what would you think is like your guys's like your core mission and like the services that you provide with that company business,
yeah. So as we transition to the technology space, our mission became we're about bringing the provider and the patient closer together. And we do that by removing the administrative burden that doctors have to go through. So doctors are required to meet so many quality standards for insurance companies, but a lot of times it's not really. A lot more administrative, a lot of paperwork. And so we built an AI-based automation that integrates electronic medical records that evaluates what open care gaps the patients have, and then basically does all the work for the doctor before that patient comes in, sending the patient forms for their open care gaps, documenting the patient's progress note, and articulating everything that the patient needs for the doctor before that patient comes in. So in that sense, our mission is kind of taking away the administrative burden out from in between the patient and the provider and allowing that provider to go back to really taking care of the patient.
that's awesome, especially with how painstaking medical care can be.
Yeah.
Any way to make that an easier process for both the primary care provider and the inpatient, the user, is a huge accomplishment. With that being said, looking back on the past 7 years and the 3 years with the other side of the house, what would you consider as like your greatest achievement um, in building this so far?
Yeah, my vision was always to sell the company. Um, and I just recently did that back in April. Um, so I would say that that's probably to date the biggest accomplishment was building it up, having a sufficient revenue base for us to attract potential buyers, and then going through the whole due diligence process and validating our product, validating our code, validating that's really as valuable as we were kind of touting it to be, and then selling it and being able to kind of look at what the next thing is going to be in life.
So
Um,
you think that that was like those principles and strategies are kind of what drove that success to getting you to that selling point?
yeah, I mean, I think so to speak a little bit to the, you know, strategies or processes. I mean, I think that at a high level, obviously there's more specific. There's like, Kanban and Lean. There's different methodologies that are more directly applied. But at a high level, we really focused on the concept of um, motion begets feedback. So if we move, we're going to get feedback on what's going right, what's going wrong. But we also need to not confuse motion for progress. So just because we're moving and doing a lot of things doesn't mean we're necessarily like, marching down the field. Um, and so I would say that those kind of things are probably the at a high level, the biggest things that we kind of kept doing repeatedly. And then getting really small and really specific when you're talking about I'm trying to think of a way to describe this that's not specific or esoteric to the industry, but when you have a problem that either a user's having or something that's a client's complaining about, they don't like something that happened. It's really easy to be like, oh, the client said this, and I think this is the problem from a high level. Let's fix it this way. And really doing like root cause analysis or really getting down to like every single step that happened. What does every log say? Like, how do we really get close enough to what the end user or the provider experienced to know what went wrong? So we're actually fixing the right thing and also being thoughtful of why wouldn't they like that and then changing it. So like iterating really quickly, but having the humility to call your baby ugly and say, this isn't working. What did they experience? What would have the best way have been about it? Okay, go fix that. Let's go do that and try to do it really, really quickly. So I think those kind of things mashed together, you know, progress begets feedback. Don't mix progress up for sorry, don't mix up progress for motion for progress. Don't mix up motion for progress, and then figure out what your end user isn't happy with, and then iterate on it really quickly. That's like 25 seconds. I feel like I kind of stumbled over my words. Does that make sense, James?
No, 100%. Yeah, it sounds like you have like some really powerful like steward, like servant leadership qualities. You talked about listening to the clients, understanding their feedback. You have incredible foresight. It sounds like. What do you think that you would categorize as like something that kind of grounds you in terms of like a servant leadership to like take care of your employees and like the clients and the doctors and patient care admin?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that we do from a client perspective that's just good client management. I think that's kind of part of the job. I would say servant leadership though is really where it's not mandated or it's not like best practice, but we do it because it's the right thing to do or we want to take care of our people. So like one of the things that we have that I would consider sort of servant leadership is any one person in the company is allowed to ask their direct boss to do their job for a day. So if we ever set a standard that that employee thinks is unfair or unrealistic, they can ask their boss, which a lot of times is me, to go do the work and say, "Hey, this is what we need to get done today. I don't think that's realistic. Okay, I'll do your job for today and see if it's realistic. Because if it's not, then we move the goal. We're like, hey, you're right. This isn't a realistic thing for you to do. Let's make this the goal. Does that feel more reasonable? Um,
That's, that's pretty
so I'd say that's
impressive.
an example. Yeah.
That's that kind of stewardship in terms of like hey, I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I'm not willing to do. And having that empathy of like, hey, I can see where you're coming from in terms of like the workload might be too intense, so let me step in and help in that way. Very impressive.
100%. Yeah, man.
With all of those different challenges and stuff, what would you think might be, if you had to pick something, would be the most significant challenge you faced as like a CEO?
Yeah. Um, so when we started the technology company, we were spending a lot more money than we were bringing in, right? It was very expensive to run. I didn't really know what I was doing. I never ran a technology company before, and so we started building these automations out in a low code, no code platform, and we were trying to move into kind of a full stack environment where we had front and back end devs, and we weren't using this low code, no code environment. I didn't really know what I was doing, and so it was a repeated process of kind of getting smacked in the face and being told you don't know enough, go learn more. And so I had to go back to school to be a software engineer, to be able to speak intelligently to what we had going on. And it was a combination of so it was a combination of building up a revenue base that was starting to cover our costs, and then it was on this low code, no code platform that had really expensive fees. And I wanted to switch us over to this full stack web environment that I just got trained on. But we just went from losing a lot of money to building a revenue base that I was then going to switch over to a new code base that could go make us go back into losing a lot of money again, right? If things didn't go well, or we weren't, if things didn't transition, over well. So it's a lot more complicated when you're writing all your own custom code. Um, and so it was kind of just like sitting in the pocket and saying, this is tough, trust yourself, keep moving forward one step at a time. Um, but definitely a kind of huge leap from you know, uh, from doing one set of services in one environment to trying to replicate them in another environment, and one that we really didn't have competencies doing, but knowing between AI and everything else coming out that we had to get here, we had to build our own custom code to get this work done. Um, that was probably, kind of probably the most difficult thing we had to accomplish as a business. And took a really long time for us to kind of make that hurdle and build the competencies to be successful in full stack web development.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you have an incredible level of resiliency, and it sounds like the technical challenges required you to kind of do a trial by fire, and then that trial by fire, you were forged in the fire.
Yeah.
So again, incredible, and I'm really excited to continue to hear about. Um, so with all of that, what would you say helped you most navigate that challenge? I know you talked about how you had to go back to school to learn like coding so that you could have like the software engineer. So what would you say that that's probably like the thing that made you most successful in that?
Yeah, I would say that definitely really helped us be successful. What what I had to get beat up on a lot of times before I really learned it was, don't move forward until the last thing's done really well.
Mm,
And we built process around that. So we have a very strong process for how we document the requirements, the end user requirements. Um, so I would say that our process to document end user requirements, put that into a project management tool, write software code, and then write testing and unit tests and integration tests against that software to make sure it did what it was supposed to do. That process, implementing that, and then being religiously diligent about never moving forward unless the previous step was done successfully, and then the previous problem was resolved successfully. So if we have this problem, it's a big problem, and we go through all these steps to do it, it's so easy to get to 80%. Like getting 100% done on something, getting it done right, and knowing that you're never going to have to deal with this problem again because we actually did it correctly. That's the whole point of software, was critical, because we kind of go through this process, we talk about it, we all agree how it should get done, so we go do it, then we go turn our eye towards the next problem, and then we come back and be like, wait, you didn't write your quality assurance tests? You didn't,
Mm.
what do you mean? Well, why didn't we do it? Right. And then you start going through this and you realize these things will continue to bite us in the butt until we master our basics of the process. Um, and I would say that that by and far was the biggest kind of instigator of our success. Um, was the diligence to the process and fully resolving an issue or a problem before moving on to the next thing.
Yeah, what a simple yet powerful concept, and again, it's a testament to your attention to detail. Um, with that being said, how how would you describe your like leadership style, and like how you influence others, through like expertise, relationships, formal authority, or do you have any other approach? Like, what would you say is like your kind of like leadership style in terms of like how do you influence your employees and so forth?
Yeah, probably the best way to describe that, and I think some people like it, but I also think some people might hate it. Is if somebody asks me a question that I think they should know the answer to, I don't give them the answer. I ask them questions back, and I try to get them along the lines of thinking about how would you think about solving this problem if I didn't just give you the answer? Like what tools do you have available to you? What trainings have you done in the past? Like how would you get there yourself? Um, and or sometimes it's a complicated problem and you know you're the person struggling on how to think about it. And so you'll ask questions that sort of like walk them down the path of like how do you get from like A to B without me necessarily giving you the answers. I think that's super important. I'll also always tell people um, like people always ask me for help and it's always like the emphasis is always if you need help, if you're not sure, stop, like stop us, we will be there. I'm gonna do the same thing to you, I'm gonna ask you for help when I'm not sure about something that you've got going on. We always have each other's respect enough to be able to say stop what you're doing, can you please help me? Yes, of course. And if I tell you the same thing twice, it is a problem if you're asking the same thing a third time and we will talk about it, we're going to call it out. So it's kind of that it's kind of the we all need to be locked in towards like a vision and a direction. Come prepared with what you need to get done. Ask questions. Let's clarify. Let's make sure we're on the same page, and let's like all move together.
Yeah.
Um, so I think did that kind of answer the question?
No, 100%, and it makes a lot of sense because you're developing. It sounds like your leadership style is developing, right? So you're kind of creating like this next man up program in terms of like, hey, I know the answer, and I know you know the answer. Let's get to the answer together, so that next time you don't feel like you need to come to me, like you're already ready. And like you said,
100%.
that way everybody's moving forward together. So you're a developmental leader, and you have this like expertise in relationships, so that they feel comfortable enough to come and talk to you, but that they also feel comfortable enough in terms of like vulnerability to be like, hey, I don't feel like I know this, but then you guys work together to get to that which is just a testament to the relationships that you build. Um, what would you say is like kind of your like entrepreneurial mindset? I know at the beginning you said it was like to build the company in order to sell it, but like how essential is having like this that entrepreneurial mindset in terms of like reaching your mission and vision? And can you give like an example of your like entrepreneurial mindset and trait? Like, is it innovation? I know that you talked about risk taking and resilience, but was that too broad of a question, or?
No, I think it makes sense. I would say um, the entrepreneurial mindset is incredibly important because inherently in what you're trying to approach the market and complete um, is unreasonable. It's unreasonable for me to assume that I'm going to approach a market with big players like United Healthcare and Optum and Blue Cross Blue Shield have all their technology, proprietary technology. It's unreasonable that I'm going to approach the market and say I'm going to build a technology that competes with this and has a space, and I'm going to convince people to pay me money, and I'm going to do it a bunch of times. And I'm going to do it over again. So I think approaching it and understanding that what you're doing is unreasonable, understanding what you're doing is has a very, very high probability of failure. Um, Tech startups have a wildly high probability of failure. Self-funded tech startups have an even higher rate of failure. Um, and then flipping on the other side is them actually exiting is wildly low, is an even smaller percentage as well. So the concept of like, hey, we're gonna approach this, we're doing something reasonable and screw it, let's do it anyways, I think is really, really something how you gotta recognize what what you're trying to bite off. Um, and so I think that's one component which is risk taking for sure. Um, Grit is so you know so wildly important. And I will say too, I think you mentioned something about mission and vision. Um, you know, measure so backtracking to like mission and vision, we call them our like framework for decision making. Measure twice, cut once, be unstoppable, be curious. These things are kind of like when you're coming at a problem and approaching a problem. If you're coming from this framework, we think you're going to do really well in solving, your own problem. Um, and so we try to use these when we're approaching a problem. We're basically just asking, hey, have you kind of come at this? Have you asked a lot of questions about it? Do you feel like you understand the problem? Are you just stopping when you got your first no, or have you tried 4 or 5 different ways to get around this? Um, and have you really made sure that when you're implementing this solution that it is in fact the right one? You maybe verified with somebody, checked in with them. Um, and so that kind of process is sort of just day to day, and it's definitely sort of it's it definitely guides our daily decisions, my daily decisions, and is also one of the things I'm proud of is culture is like such a word people throw around, and I think it's actually frankly kind of useless and just like overhyped and overdone. And to me, culture is when you're sitting in your room coding or you're in a meeting and you're not really sure about something, or um maybe somebody said something you disagreed with, that's not how you remember it was supposed to be done. Being curious enough to like ask a question and say, hey, is that really how we do it? Like that's an example of like strong culture, right? When you're sitting in your room, you're kind of dejected, you have a tough problem you're trying to solve, you tried it once and you're like, I think I'm just going to message my manager and say I'm having a tough time with it, I'm going to get it done. Maybe trying it like 3 more times before sending that message, right? Like that's strong culture, right? Um, and so being able to see other people exhibit that was really exciting, to see and know that it's sort of permeated, not just in my day to day, but also in their day to day. I would say that that's the critical was really cool, really exciting to see. Um, I think I talked about a few of those points kind of around. The other thing I talked about a little bit is like maybe grit, but do you feel like I answered that, James, or do you feel like
Oh,
there's more?
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think your risk taking and your resilience is definitely noted, and like you talked about in terms of like the culture, in that you want not necessarily people to buy in terms of like, hey, I'm gonna fall in line, but buy in terms of like, hey, I'm gonna question, I'm gonna challenge, I'm gonna try to improve the organization, the company, rather than be a good employee. So I think that's a testament to your leadership. Um, Speaking of leadership,
Yeah.
I know that you mentioned George Paz as a leader that you relate to. What aspects of his leadership style do you feel like you relate to most, or in what ways, do you feel like you're similar in a leadership approach from him?
I would say most, somebody quoted or commented on his leadership style and said, he's sort of like cuts through red tape like a hot knife through butter. And I definitely agree that that kind of approach is kind of how I tackle work. There's a number one priority. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of things we can do, and we got to go tackle that number one priority, and we got to do whatever it takes to you know to make it happen. Um, that's kind of great and talk, and then actually doing it, and executing on it is difficult. But I'd say for sure, like that's probably the most. I would say one of the things that I picked up from him and think, I learned from the most.
Yeah, I think from what I'm learning from you and what I've learned from George Paz, your strategic foresight, um, the ability that you have to see a problem and see the layers and dissect the layers and then disseminate the information so that everybody buys into following through on the solution all the way to the 100%, I think is a very similar key trait that you and George Paz have. So uh,
Seems.
I'd like to wrap this up though. So, in closing, what advice would you give to an aspiring CEO in your industry?
Um, I would just say, um, never be um, too high up to not roll up your sleeves. The best solutions are the ones that are closest to the problem. And so, never forget, where you started. Make sure you know mastery of the basics really, really well. And yeah, stay close to the problem.
Awesome. Yeah, that's beautifully said. Well, thank you for your time, Greg, and uh, hope to see, look forward to seeing what you do in the future. And thanks for sitting and talking with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for interviewing me.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk soon. Bye.
Yeah. Did it end? What happened? Is it over?